Hey, it's me, I'm back. I know it's been a while. I've been handling some shit. You know how it is, that's the same excuse. If a YouTuber is gone and they didn't die, you still see them posting on social media and stuff, that's because that stuff is easier. Making videos is a little more involved and sometimes life just gets in the way. But I'm back! And I know I've said this many times and then disappeared again, but this time is for real. I promise, please take me back. I'll change. Anyway, you might be wondering, why today of all days, Izzy? Why are you back today? Well, let me tell a little story. I started on YouTube back in 2008. It's a long time ago. I'm old, okay? In retrospect, I owe my career, if I can call it that. It always sounds a little presumptuous when a YouTuber refers to their work on the platform as a career. At least I feel this way. I don't know. Anyway, if I can be said to have a career, it's in no small part because of Sony. I have right here, and it's a little dusty. It's a little, I should probably clean this up or make a new one. This right here is a Sony W80, DSC W80. It is, as the label says down here, my first camera. This is the camera I bought to start my YouTube channel. This is the camera that started it all. It sucked. The microphone was awful, and truth be told, I don't know how anybody could put up with watching a video made with that resolution and such horrible audio. Horrible everything, really. I didn't even know how to edit videos. And speaking of editing, the software I used to edit my videos was called Sony Vegas. Now, it's not called that anymore. Sony has sold their stake of that part of their business a long time ago to a company called Magix. It's called Movie Studio today, but the old timers, we still call it Sony Vegas. So I was shooting video on a Sony camera using Sony software to edit it, and the subject that really made my channel grow, the subject that turned this little weird hobby into like something that now requires I hire an accountant, was this baby right here, the PlayStation Portable. And today, the Psp Turns 18. That's right. Back in December 12, 2004, that's when this thing came out. Now, you might end up seeing videos and lists celebrating the PSP's launch in two different dates, and that's because, as it's usually the case with these things, it had a Japanese launch, that's today, 18 years ago, and then it had a North American launch on March the 25th of the following year. Is that right? Did I screw up the dates? I was wrong by one day, March 24th. That's what I get for thinking I can wing this video without a script. I didn't write a script for this because I feel like I don't need a script to talk about the PSP. This is my favorite console of all time, and if anything, I could talk about this thing for hours. Now, you had to be there to truly appreciate what this thing was. Now, I know I speak to a lot of very young people here. Like, I'm 38. I'm probably older than most of you watching this. So if you're like in your 20s, you didn't live through that moment, but I gotta tell you, this thing was a game changer because first of all, this was before smartphones, right? So this is a portable device with a nice big widescreen that you could watch movies on, you could watch shows on. The media it used, it would go back. This makes the PSP look like an old school VCR. Anyway, the ironically named Universal Media Disc, and I say ironically named because the PSP was the only device that could run it, so not very universal. Not to mention, not every studio jumped on board, so there weren't that many releases on UMD. Again, not very universal. In fact, I don't think Universal Studios put out any movies on UMD, making it even less universal. Anyway, I have a few here. I should have prepared better. Some comedy specials would come out on it, some TV shows. The resolution wasn't the highest, but again, this is before smartphones. The only other thing around the same time period that could play video was like the iPod video, and the screen was much smaller. Interestingly enough, both used the same file format for videos, .mp4, and back then, remember Google Video? Google Video was a great tool for iPod and PSP owners alike because there was an option to download whatever video was on Google Video as an MP4 file. So back then I downloaded a bunch of movies to watch on my PSP using that. But it wasn't just games and movies. You could listen to music on this thing, you could read books, you could read comic books. It was basically a smartphone before smartphones that had the PlayStation brand. Now that name, PlayStation Portable, that was truth in advertising. Most of the big tentpole franchises that you would find on a PlayStation console made their way to the PlayStation Portable. Your GTAs, your Final Fantasies, your Metal Gear Solids. Hell, Star Wars Battlefront had games for this thing. If you could play it on your console at home, chances are somebody out there made a port for the PlayStation Portable. Hell, there were not one, but two excellent God of War games for this puppy right here. The amount of support that the PSP got from both Sony and third parties was amazing. In fact, it was much, much better than the PS Vita would get some years down the road, which is really sad. For hardcore PSP fans, the way Sony handled the Vita was downright heartbreaking. Anyway, back to the PSP. Now, one thing that's interesting to also keep in mind is that this was a risky gamble because back then, and even before then, before the 2000s, Nintendo had a hegemony when it came to portables. Many other companies tried to take a stab at it. Sega tried it with the Nomad, with the Game Gear. Atari tried it with the Lynx twice. Many companies, Tiger Handheld, a bunch of companies tried to make a portable console, but they all got slaughtered by whatever Nintendo was putting out at the time, be it the Game Boy or the Game Boy Advance. And when Sony decided to make this, there was a lot of skepticism. There was some enthusiasm, especially when they first announced what it looks like, because this is beautiful even today, I think. Mine is obviously a little grimy, it's a little dusty. I haven't turned this one on in quite a while. In fact, I'm not sure if you can tell, but there's a bit of a bump here. That's because I bought the Stamina Pack, which is a bigger battery, and because it was bulkier, it required a different battery cover. I'm not even sure if this thing still turns on, because the battery's most likely dead. I know it's still in working condition. It's been sitting around for more than a year, I think. I rarely play on this model. I much prefer the PSP Go. I have two. I have the white one. This is my go-to. This is my daily driver. And then I have the black one, which was a little easier to find. This is now a little bit rare. This is my retirement plan right here because prices for PSPs, and in fact, most retro games have been skyrocketing as of late. So this guy right here this is my, the college fund for Izzy Jr. if there ever is one. Now, as you can see, I'm playing Super Mario World here, a game that was not made by Sony. And that's because it didn't take very long after the PSP's launch for hackers to find a way to run unsigned code, meaning applications that were not made by Sony. And one of the first things that people started getting into their PSPs, and certainly was the reason why I bought mine, is emulators. And the PSP was a very competent emulation machine, to this day, I would say even. Obviously, now there's much better offerings, but this guy could run games really, really well. And in fact, a few years down the road, Sony made it so it would officially run PS1 titles. And that's when the name really started making a lot of sense. It became literally a PlayStation Portable. And in fact, I didn't grow up with a PlayStation. My family couldn't afford one. And I played Every PS1 game that I actually played was on this guy right here. And in fact, that opened up an entire new world for me because I have always been an RTS fanatic. I love real-time strategy games and I love portability. Now, these two worlds don't often intersect. RTSs are mostly relegated to computers to be played with a mouse and keyboard. But one blessed day, I found out that there are a lot of very competent ports of old school RTSs that I used to play on PC or the PS1, meaning now I could play them portably. Warcraft 2, I actually now have played that more than I played the PC version. That's how good it is. And it was made by EA, of all people. Amazing. That's probably the most surprising part of the whole story. Dude, I played so much. I cannot tell you how many times I ended up like 4 or 5 stations past where I was supposed to get off when I was riding the train to work, because I was playing Warcraft 2 on this thing. The PSP has given me a career. It has turned something I did as just a little hobby into something that now, and this is the more unfortunate part about the whole story, I have to pay taxes on this. I need a lawyer and an accountant because it became a business. Like I said, that part's not fun, but wouldn't have happened without this guy right here. My main channel, I have a Portuguese channel, as you know, I'm from Brazil. My channel started blowing up when I started covering PSP news. And even on this channel, to this day, videos about the PSP tend to perform better than most that I create here, which is the reason why I keep coming back to this guy, because I really love this system. It was amazing, it was groundbreaking, and remember how I told you how when the PSP was announced, Nintendo fanboys, and most analysts really, thought that this would be a disaster because every company that tried to face Nintendo's portable consoles crashed and burned horribly, right? And though the PSP is remembered by some as a failure, but that's only because its sales numbers were always compared to those of the DS. And this thing printed money. It was insane. So just not fair. If you compare how much the DS sold versus how much the PSP sold, yeah, it looks like Nintendo just won that one hands down. But you gotta remember, this thing sold more than 80 million units. To put things in perspective, that's more than the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo sold put together. So no, the PSP was not a failure. Perhaps it didn't sell as many units as the DS, but this thing actually sold pretty well. So much so that the PSP had so many revisions, and there was a PSP 2 of sorts in the PS Vita. Never understood why they ditched the PSP branding. I wonder if Sony thought that most people thought the PSP had failed, so they needed to position this thing as something completely separate. But that wasn't the real mistake. The real mistake is that Sony did not support the Vita as much as they did the PSP, and that is just tragic. I have a Vita. I haven't touched it in forever. I wish Sony and third parties had given it a little bit more love, because it's really tragic how the Vita just, you know, could not hold a candle to the impact that the PSP had in the scene. I'm going to go back to covering what this system has to offer. Its library, I feel like I've only barely scratched the surface. So I love videos like what I've been playing lately on my PSP and stuff like that. I've made videos like this before. They always perform well, and they're always a lot of fun to make. I love to recommend hidden gems to you guys. So expect more PSP videos in the near future. I love this thing. I truly love this thing. Anyway, it's great to be back. My apologies once again. But yeah, if you like what you watched here today, just follow me on social media. I'm always there. I'm always there, both on Twitter and Instagram. I'm very active. The links can be found down there. And yeah, wow, it's been a while. I don't even know how to do this anymore. How do you... We just, oh yeah, right. You're supposed to click on like and subscribe. And especially now, you know, I've been away for so long, that kind of really damages the channel with the algorithm and all those things that run the, you know, I don't really understand the under the hood stuff when it comes to YouTube, and I don't think anybody really does. I don't think YouTube understands it. But I do know that once we've been away for a while, it's very important that you guys let the algorithm know that you still care about my videos. So if you could leave a comment, if you could hit the like, I'd be so thankful. Anyway, that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy, and I'm done. Wow, I still remembered it.